We're going to talk a little bit about the process of using the accounting link. So, what is an accounting link? Um, Accounting link is an interface between TSM and your accounting program. You might have Xero Accounting, MYOB, QuickBooks, or Sybase, the ones we currently support. And it's the process by which we post transactions from TSM to the accounting system and return. So what's a typical transaction that we might post? Well, the most common one is to post invoices across to the accounting program. So typically, we don't do it in real time. We do it as a batch process at the end of the day or the week or whatever it is. So typically, conceptually, what happens when we post an invoice is that we would like to get a list of unposted invoices and then process them one by one. We need to make sure that the components of those invoices exist in the accounting program so we don't get rejections, and then we post the invoice across to the accounting program. What does that all mean? Okay, so what makes up an invoice? An invoice typically is made up of the header, the invoice itself, and line items, parts, labour, etc., and also customer information. Who is this invoice for? So if you can imagine, if I create a new customer in TSM that didn't exist before, raise an invoice for that, put on parts there that have never been used before, and post that to the accounting program, it's going to have a fit. Rejected, I don't know who the customer is. Rejected, I don't know what this part number is. Rejected, rejected, rejected. So we need to handle that. So when we post an invoice, there are components that get posted within it. The first thing we typically do is we typically go and make sure that the customer of the invoice already exists in the accounting program. And if it doesn't exist, we go and create that customer in the accounting program. The second thing we will do when posting invoices, we will go through the list of part numbers that we have on the invoice and make sure that those part numbers exist in the accounting program. And if they don't, we go and create those part numbers in the accounting program. And then finally, and we may also have to deal with things like labour. Typically, accounting programs don't handle time. So we may have to have a conversion process by which we convert that time into a part that goes into the accounting program. And we have to make sure that part exists as well. And then finally, we will then go ahead and post the invoice across to the accounting program. Okay, so that's kind of the process of posting to accounting programs. But you have to really set it up before you do that. So what I have here is I have a very simple post. It's the Sybase link. It's different from the MYOB one and the Xero one, but conceptually they're all kind of similar in conception. So what I would do is I'd go into the setup of the MYOB link and I would set some things up. So I would say, right, first of all, it's asking me, where is the accounting program? How do I find it? And typically I have a path into that. And then what I would do is I need to map TSM part numbers into accounting program part numbers. So in this particular post, we must always match TSM partners to account part numbers in the other program. So what I'll do is I'll just go and put in dummy part numbers. I'll explain what this is. So what this is saying is that the actual part numbers on the jobs themselves will go in as their actual part numbers, but I have other dummy part numbers I need to deal with. So for example, if I have quoted parts, remember that quoted total on the end of the job? That'll go through with this part number. If I have quoted labour, that will use that part number. For my time, I have to convert time into a part. That's the part number I'll use for time. For delivery fees, for service fees, for the other fees, for miscellaneous parts that don't exist, these are the part numbers that I will use when posting across to the accounting program. Outside of that, normal parts just use their regular part number and so on. Now the second thing that this has to do, so the first function of this config is to do part number mapping. The second function of the config is to determine which journals, which ledgers are updated when we do the posting. Okay, so for example, what's my bank account? So that's my bank account. So that's my default bank account that I will use. What's my sales analysis code? And I've got no idea what these things are. Let's just say it's whatever that is. my billing code. So you notice these are going through the various chart of accounts of the accounting program, bringing me out different things. And then for each of these parts, for labour, for example, I could go then assign that to its own bank account, its own journal if I wanted to, different from the default one up here. Labour might go into a particular account, and delivery fees into another, and service fees into another, and that sort of thing. So I can break it down. So the second purpose is to map transactions to various account numbers. So these are our primary ones, which is bank, sales, and expenses. But then I can break them down on a more granular level over here. The second purpose of this is to handle departmentalized accounting. It's an important concept to understand, and that is that, and there's two different parts to it. Within your chart of accounts, let's just say you did retail and commercial. You may want all of the transactions for retail to go to one set of accounts, but commercial to go to a separate set of ledgers in your accounts as well. So what we can do is we can then choose our department here and overwrite all of these with the accounts to be used when a invoice is assigned to the consulting department. And so, you know, I can choose something completely different for this. I can make it number 3, for example, let's say, and for development, I could make it number 4 or 5 or whatever it is. I may have different bank accounts that they use. So if I had different bank accounts set up, I could even configure the different bank accounts in here. And if you notice then, if I go to consulting, it's 3. If I go to development, it's, and so on. So these are ways that I can redirect the accounts that get updated depending on the department code that I'm using. There is one other purpose for this, and we don't handle it in the Sybase post, but we handle it in the Xero and MYOB posts, and that is to be able to filter transactions by department. Why would I want to do that? You may have the situation where they actually have two MYOB two separate MYOB company files set up. One for their wholesale, one for their retail, and one for their commercial. And so that what we would do in that case, but one TSM. So we have to post transactions to two different MYOBs from one single TSM. So what we do is we then install two separate accounting posts, and we filter the first one to be residential and the second one to be commercial. And then only residential transactions will go to the first MYOB, and only commercial transactions will go across to the second MYOB. So that's departmental filtering, not departmentalized journals. Okay? This is not doing any filtering. Everything goes through, it just redirects it to the relevant accounts based on department, whereas the other one only looks at the set of transactions for a particular department. And we don't handle it in this one, but we handle it in the other ones. So that's so then what happens is, so we would typically then go and fire up our accounting post, and we would click on load our debtor invoices, and it goes and does whatever it does, and then it's posted the invoices across into the accounting program. Another thing that we have in our that's common across all our accounting posts, except for the Sybase one because it's very simple, is a rejection list. So you would typically go and see a list of rejections. For whatever reason, you exceeded the credit limit. The invoice number was duplicated with something that was already there. Whatever it happened to be, there may be reasons why the accounting system rejects your transaction. So you can see a rejection list, and then you can go in and look at a rejection, fix up whatever the problem was against that invoice, and then repost that invoice through to the accounting program. Okay, so that's pretty much typically how the accounting program works. We can also use this for other things like importing the list of customers and parts from the accounting program into TSM. So typically if we have a new installation with a customer, we'd go and load all their customers from their MYOB into their TSM. We can do that through the accounting link as well, and so on. So that's what the accounting link does.
So if you want MYOB accounting software, it will have another.
It's a different link. This is the Sybase one.
Yeah, so you have
The
another.
Moab one's completely different.
Oh,
I don't have it installed here, so I
I
can't.
see.
Find it.